So I don't really know why it took me quite so long to read this book because this book is a classic, especially with the age of children that I work with. Welcome to another book versus movie video. Welcome back, or if you are new here, welcome. My name is Katrina, and I make bookish content here on this channel as well as movie reviews every week. I love making book versus movie videos, but it has been a long time since I have made one, and so I'm very excited to be bringing you one here. I think because they do take a little bit of extra work of like you read the book and you have to make sure you watch the movie quite soon afterwards, because I've read all the Summer I Turned Pretty books and then didn't watch the series quick enough afterwards. So now I'm like, can I make a real comparison? However, I watched I read the book of Holes by Louis Sacher, and then I watched the Disney um, version of the movie, and I did watch them and read them very, very close together. So all of my book versus movie videos are spoiler free, and I will leave a playlist of my book versus movie videos linked up above because they are my favorite kind of videos to make. So, first of all, let me say, when I said at the beginning, I don't know how it's taken me so long to read this book because it is such a like middle grade classic book. Um, I loved this book. When I first started it, I was a little bit like, I don't know if it's going to be me. I don't know if it's a bit too like actiony to be me. I love a dual timeline, however. So the book has a dual timeline. The film also has a dual timeline, but they are portrayed in slightly different ways, which I found quite interesting. So at the end of the audiobook, which is how I read the book independently and then I read the paperback with my class, at the end of the audiobook, the author comes on and does a bit of an author's note and talks about the fact that he knew that he wanted to tell this story, but he didn't know how he was going to make it interesting, being a book that is just about a bunch of kids digging holes in the desert, because there's only so many ways you can describe somebody digging a hole and it being tiring or boring or difficult or causing pain or what have you. And so the reason he did a dual timeline was to break up the building of the holes. And actually, it's the dual timeline and the clues that we get in the dual timeline as to why the boys are digging these holes, that I think I liked the best about the book. So we follow Stanley, and he's off to Camp Green Lake because he's done something wrong. So he's been arrested and sent to a juvenile detention center. And this is no different in the book and the film. And then we get to meet the other boys at the juvenile detention centre. And again, this is no different in the book and the film. The boys have real names, but they all go by nicknames. And eventually, Stanley does get his own nickname. Now, there's a couple of differences between the book and the film when it comes to Stanley, because Stanley in the book, again, this is not a spoiler, but in the book, he's described as being overweight and he's been bullied because he's overweight. He even talks about his like middle school bully, and the fact that like sometimes he thinks about him when he's at Camp Green Lake. And then we have the fact that we've got Stanley's family, and Stanley's family is mentioned in a very specific context in the book, but in the film, I think for obvious reasons, Stanley's family is built out a lot more. So we see Stanley's mother, Stanley's father, and Stanley's grandfather, not to be confused with Stanley's great great grandfather, because they are all called Stanley Yelnats, Stanley and Stanley backwards. But in the film, again, probably just to be able to show the viewer a little bit more about Stanley, since he hasn't got this like overweight bully issue that he had at school before. They've built out his family a little bit more. But we get the amazing Henry Winkler as Stanley's dad here, which I absolutely loved. I was like, my God, it's Henry Winkler. How has he popped up? Honestly, this film has like so many famous faces in, and I didn't know that this was actually Shia LaBeouf's debut as well. Like this was his like big screen debut, which is really cool. And apparently, Steven Spielberg saw him in this and was like, I want to cast him in Indiana Jones, and that's how he got the job in Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. The more you know. So those are the big differences with Stanley. The other thing, the sort of small nuance thing that's a difference with Stanley and the Camp Green Lake thing is that Stanley used to pretend that he was going to a summer camp, because obviously it's implied in both the book and the film that his family doesn't have a lot of money, and so therefore wouldn't necessarily be able to afford to send him to a summer camp. So he used to have this idea in his head of going to this summer camp. And so when he's at Camp Green Lake, he will sometimes pretend like it's this summer camp that he made up in his head in order to cope with that, and it's a coping mechanism. Again, that's a detail that will be in the book to like build the character up more, since we don't have a visual of the character, but also it's a detail that's included because in the book you've got more time to include that detail, whereas in the film, it's a decent length of film. It's a 2-hour film, but again, the audiobook was like 7 hours or something, 8 hours maybe. It's a significant difference in time. Then we have the like counselors, or the people who run or are in charge of Camp Green Lake. So we have the warden, who is played by Sigourney Weaver. Again, I kind of had a very similar picture in my head when I was reading the book as to what the warden would look like, as to what Sigourney Weaver looks like. I think that Sigourney Weaver brings just a little bit more power to the warden role than what I'd built up in my head. I maybe had somebody who was a little bit more petite and feisty, as opposed to, a bit of an Amazon that is Sigourney Weaver. Then we have the guy that sort of like runs it for her, which is Mr. Sir. I thought that the Mr. Sir character was incredibly well played. I think that the like little nuances and little details of his character are almost exactly the same in the book as they are in the film. And then we have Mr. Pendanski, who is like the guy who runs Tent D, which is the room that Stanley belongs to, which is very much a tent in the film. I feel like it might be more of a like, in my head it was more like a traditional summer camp bunk in the book, but again, that might just be the way it's been described to me. But Mr. Pendanski in the book is Dr. Pendanski in the film. But it's funny because the guy who plays him in the film just plays that kind of character in so many films, and I know him from having watched a lot of Coen Brothers movies. I've got a whole like Coen Brothers video that I'll link up above. But he was really interesting because he's been given this like doctor title, and you're like, where has this come from? And again, I'm not going to give any spoilers as to why he has that in the film, but that's just a difference. Whereas the character he plays, again, is really so similar to the character that he plays in the character that he's written as in the book. And then we have the flashback scenes where we see Stanley's no good, rotten, pig stealing great great grandfather. I feel like I've got those words in the wrong order. Which his name doesn't come up as often in the film as it does in the book. But again, that's just because you see it written down so many times in the book. And especially if you're reading it out loud, you're like, I know how many times I've now read this character's name out loud. And then we have Catherine Barlow, Kissing Kate Barlow, and Sam, who live at the Green Lake when it was still a lake, and as part of the before timeline, and they look exactly how I pictured that they would look. Patricia Arquette plays Kissing Kate Barlow, and I just think that she just plays Kate exactly how I would have expected her. Like, her and Sigourney Weaver probably could have traded places in my mind, but both of them like play the character just as strongly as I expected the character would have been played. And again, they are pretty much the same. Their storyline is pretty much the same. The only difference, as I sort of said previously, with the past storyline and the present storyline is, in the book, you almost have like a chapter or two of current day action, and then you have a chapter of before, and then you have a chapter or two of present day and a chapter of before. It's a little bit more regimented like that, whereas I feel that the flashbacks are clumped together in the film, again probably because of time constraints, but you see less flashbacks, I feel like, in the film than you do in the book. But again, thinking about that author's note, the fact that the flashbacks were used to help break up the right, we're going to dig another hole now aspect of holes, I think the flashbacks were needed to be more often in the book than they were in the film. But again, that's just my opinion. As always, in my book versus movie videos, I'm going to tell you which I prefer. It is usually one over the other, but for the reason that this medium made me gasp, and this reason made me like comment aloud when I was reading by myself, and this medium made me like make predictions about what was going to happen, I think I definitely preferred the book. I think I got more action out of the book. I was a little bit bored watching the film, again potentially just because I knew exactly what was going to happen, but reading the book I was like, oh my god, I can't believe that just happened. Whereas in the film, I don't feel like the drama, even with the soundtrack and the being able to see the sweat on their faces, I don't feel like the film just gave you those like oh moments that the book did. So that's why. As always, if there is a book that you would like me to read and compare to the movie or the TV show of the same book, then do let me know in comments. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Make sure you are subscribed and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on future bookish content or movie reviews coming your way very soon. And I will be back with another video for you very soon. So I will see you then. Thanks for watching.